If you've watched this video, you are probably thinking, hey Lily, your reading score decreased from Band 9 to Band 8. I know, but back then when I was getting 9s, I was actively preparing for the exam and actively practicing the reading test. This time, I just didn't practice for too long, like 3 years. I only did 2 mock tests before the exam and went straight to take it. So I think a Band A is still a pretty decent score considering that I didn't practice for 3 years. So in this video, I will show you the overall strategy I use every time for the reading test. This strategy is magic, I'm not exaggerating. Just look at the comments on one of my old videos. So many viewers got A, 8.5, or even 9 in reading using this strategy. I will also show you how to handle each type of question. We will be doing a whole reading test together. That's 3 reading passages. So this video is gonna be very long. Let's get started. So the overall strategy that has helped me and so many of my viewers get an A or even 9 is to do all types of questions at the same time. Because as you can see, the first type of question is matching information, right? If we first read all the paragraphs and do matching information, and then move on to the second type of question, which is matching people's name, that means we need to go back and read all the paragraphs all over again. We answer all types of questions at the same time because this is the only way to avoid reading a paragraph multiple times and finish all reading questions in just 1 hour. Now, how should we read all these questions? The first type of question is matching information. However, I wouldn't read all these 7 pieces of information right now because it's impossible to remember all of them, right? And the second type of information is matching people's names. I wouldn't read all these people's statements right now either because, again, it's impossible to remember all this information. So for now, we only need to read question 12. What ecological problem do the roots of bamboo help to control? Now, we've read it. What if you don't know what keywords to highlight? In this case, I would read the title of the passage, The Wonder Plant. So the passage must be about the plant, right? What plant? Bamboo is used for a wide range of purposes, but now it seems it may be under threat. We can guess the passage is probably about the plant bamboo, right? So the word bamboo shouldn't be an important word because the whole passage is about bamboo. The word root must be more important. The roots of bamboo. And I think ecological problem is definitely a very important key phrase because the question is asking about an ecological problem, right? What ecological problem? It's asking about an ecological problem. So we highlight these 2 keywords, and when we find these 2 keywords in the passage, we should slow down and read this carefully so that we can find the answer to question 12, right? Before we continue, I want to show you a very useful app you can use to prepare for the IELTS speaking test. Thank you Elsa Speak for sponsoring this portion of the video. Elsa Speak has a feature called Elsa AI, which we can use to do mock tests at home and receive feedback on our performance. Once you are in the app, tap the Discover icon, then tap Elsa AI. Select My Own Scenario. For example, let's say we want to practice part 3 of the speaking test. We want to practice answering questions about social media. Hey Elsa, can you ask me questions about social media from part 3 of the IELTS speaking test?
So, how do you think social media has altered the way people communicate with each other?
I think before social media, if we wanted to learn something from someone, we have to communicate with them face to face. But actually not have access to millions, so social media has changed that. See, this is just like a mock test. It trains your reaction. If you practice with Elsa like this every day, how is it even possible that you don't improve? And Elsa even summarizes what you've just said using better expressions. For example, I used allow us to do something, but open up opportunities for doing something is definitely a better expression, isn't it? You can take notes and learn from Elsa. And if you have trouble answering a question, simply tap the light bulb icon, and Elsa will give you some ideas. After you end the conversation, Elsa will provide feedback on your pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar, pointing out your errors and helping you correct them. You can download the Elsa and get a 7-day premium membership for free by using the first link in the pinned comment or the description box. And we have an exclusive discount for you guys. You can get 50% of a 1-year premium Elsa membership by using the second link in the pinned comment or the description. Thank you, Elsa, once again for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now, let's start reading the passage. When reading, always read with a purpose in mind. That means always know the exact information you are looking for. For example, even though we haven't read the 7 pieces of information in questions 1 to 7, we know we should find out if a paragraph contains a certain piece of information, right? That means we shouldn't read very quickly. I will read at a pace that allows me to grasp the general meaning of the text because it helps me decide if a paragraph contains this information or not. And as you can see, part A contains 2 paragraphs, right? I wouldn't read these 2 paragraphs together because by the time I finish reading the second paragraph, I probably already forget what the first paragraph is about. So let's just read the first paragraph and see if it contains any of these 7 pieces of information and if it contains a person's name. I don't think the answer to question 12 will appear in the first paragraph, but it doesn't hurt to remind yourself that you need to look for an ecological problem and the roots of bamboo, right? Alright, let's read the first paragraph.
Every year, during the rainy season, the mountain gorillas of Central Africa migrate to the lower slopes of the Virunga Mountains to graze on bamboo. For the 650 or so that remain in the wild, it's a vital food source. Without it, says Ian Redmond, chairman of the Ape Alliance, their chances of survival would be reduced significantly.
Have you noticed here we have a person's name? I would always highlight the name I found just in case that I can't find an answer right now. I can quickly go back here and read it again later on, right? So this person says, without it, it refers to the bamboo, right? So without bamboo, their chances of survival would be reduced significantly. There refers to this animal species, right? So this animal's chances of survival would be reduced significantly. Now let's see if any of this statement matches this sentence. Some people do not regard bamboo as an endangered plant species. This sentence doesn't talk about bamboo being endangered, right? This sentence, as well as the whole paragraph, is about bamboo being a vital food source. So this is not the answer. As you can see, we can just use the keywords in an option to rule it out, right? But what are keywords? Keywords are words that are special or words that convey an important message, such as the word endangered. Next, a scarcity of bamboo places certain wildlife under threat. Yes, I think it's very obvious that this statement means exactly the same as this one. Because remember, the IELTS reading test is all about synonyms. Scarcity is a rephrase of without it, right? And place certain wildlife under threat is a rephrase of their chances of survival would be reduced significantly. So I think it's very obvious that this person says this. So we definitely need to understand every single word in a statement to decide that this statement is the correct answer. But we can just use some keywords to rule out the statement if that statement is not the correct answer. Let me give you another example. Research methods investigating endangered plants have yet to be fully developed. So what are the keywords here? Research methods is definitely a very important key phrase, and this sentence doesn't mention research methods at all. So this statement is not the answer. Next. The greatest danger to bamboo is disturbance of the places it grows in. Danger is a very important word here, right? This sentence doesn't talk about the danger to bamboo, so this is not the answer. Once again, we can just use a keyword in a statement to rule out that statement if that statement is not the correct answer. Before we continue, let me just quickly mention that we are hosting a 3-day writing task 2 challenge. The link is in the description. Just take a look. So we do matching names before we do matching information because doing matching names actually helps us better understand this paragraph, right? Which in turn allows us to better decide whether this paragraph contains any of these pieces of information. Now let's read all these questions. Again, just like matching names, we can use the keywords in these questions to help us rule out those incorrect options. For example, an assessment of current levels of knowledge about bamboo. I think current knowledge is definitely a very important word here, but I'm not sure whether this paragraph is about current knowledge or old knowledge. It doesn't matter. I will just move on. A comparison between bamboo and more fragile plants. There is no comparison to other plants at all, right? So this is a wrong answer. Next, details of the commercial significance of bamboo. Obviously, commercial significance is a key phrase here, and obviously, this paragraph doesn't talk about the commercial significance of bamboo, right? Next, a human development that is threatening the availability of bamboo. Like if you are not sure whether this paragraph talks about the availability of bamboo or not, you can use human development to help you decide whether this is a wrong answer. This paragraph doesn't talk about humans at all, right? This paragraph is about this animal species. So this isn't the correct answer. Next, a description of the limited extent of existing research on bamboo. The paragraph doesn't talk about research, so wrong answer. Examples of the uses to which bamboo is put. Uses is definitely a very important word here. Does this paragraph talk about the uses of bamboo? I don't know. I'm not sure if being a food source is considered a use of bamboo or not. But I don't think this is the answer because it uses the plural examples and the uses. This paragraph only talks about one use of bamboo, which is being a food source, right? So I don't think this is the answer. Finally, an explanation of how bamboo may contribute to the survival of range of plants. Does the paragraph talks about range of plants? No, it doesn't. Again, this paragraph is about this animal species and bamboo, right? It doesn't mention range of plants, so this isn't the answer. So I'm just not sure whether the first paragraph contains this piece of information or not. So I will just highlight it. If I can't find a very obvious answer to this question, I will just choose A. And don't forget that we also need to take care of question 12. This paragraph doesn't mention ecological problems and the roots of bamboo, right? So now we can move on to the second paragraph.
Gorillas aren't the only local keen on bamboo. For the people who live close to the Virungas, it's a valuable and versatile raw material. But in the past 100 years or so, resources have come under increasing pressure as populations have exploded, and large areas of bamboo forest have been cleared to make way for commercial plantations. Sadly, this isn't an isolated story. All over the world, the ranges of many bamboo species appear to be shrinking, endangering the people and animals that depend upon them.
There is no people's names in this paragraph, right? So now we only need to answer matching information questions. Again, I'm not sure whether this is about current knowledge or old knowledge. Doesn't matter. I will just move on. There is no comparison to other plants, right? The only plant species that this paragraph mentions is bamboo. So this is a wrong answer. Next, commercial significance of bamboo. As you can see here, we have commercial plantations. So let's read it carefully and see if this is about the commercial significance of bamboo or not. But in the past 100 years or so, resources have come under increasing pressure as populations have exploded and large areas of bamboo forest have been cleared to make way for commercial plantations. I don't think this is about the commercial significance of bamboo because bamboo has actually been cleared. So they cleared bamboo to make way for commercial plants. That means bamboo is not important to them, right? So this is not the answer. Next, a human development that is threatening the availability of bamboo. So we have just read this sentence very carefully. This sentence is about human development, right? Because here it says populations have exploded. Here, populations refers to the populations of the people who live close to, maybe this is the name of a place. Anyways, here, populations refers to the populations of humans, right? But does the explosion of the populations threaten the availability of bamboo? And here it says resources have come under increasing pressure. I think this part talks about threatening the availability of bamboo because if you read the preceding text, you will know here resources refers to bamboo. So yes, I think this part is about threatening the availability of bamboo. So part A contains this piece of information. But we need to continue to read the remaining questions because a part can contain more than one pieces of information. This shouldn't be the answer because this paragraph doesn't talk about research. And this paragraph doesn't talk about the uses of bamboo either. What about the last one? No, this paragraph doesn't mention range of plants. The only plant that this paragraph mentions is bamboo. And don't forget question 12. The paragraph doesn't talk about ecological problems and the roots of bamboo, right? So no answer to question 12. Now let's move on to part B. Let's first read the first paragraph in part B and remember the information that you need to look for. So we need to see if this paragraph contains any of these pieces of information, right? And we also need to see if this paragraph contains any people's names and if it mentions an ecological problem or the roots of bamboo.
Despite bamboo's importance, we know surprisingly little about it. A recent report published by the UN Environment Programme, UNEP, and the International Network for Bamboo and Rattan, INBAR, has revealed just how profound our ignorance of global bamboo resources is, particularly in relation to conservation.
Alright, this paragraph doesn't mention any people's names, so let's do matching information. An assessment of current levels of knowledge about bamboo. As you can see, here it uses the word recent, which is a synonym of current, right? So let's read this sentence carefully. A recent report has revealed just how profound our ignorance of global bamboo resources is, particularly in relation to conservation. From the word ignorance, we can know that our knowledge about bamboo is very limited, right? The first sentence also says our knowledge about bamboo is very limited. We know surprisingly little about it. We know surprisingly little about bamboo. So this paragraph mentions our levels of knowledge about bamboo. I think it's also about our current levels of knowledge because it uses the word recent. I'm just not sure if this is an assessment or not, but anyways, B is much more likely than A. So let's just change the answer to B and also read the remaining questions. There is no comparison to other plants in this paragraph, right? And I don't think this paragraph mentions the commercial significance of bamboo. And what about question 5? A description of the limited extent of existing research on bamboo. This paragraph doesn't talk about research, right? This paragraph is about a report. A report and research are two different things. So I don't think this paragraph contains this information. And this paragraph certainly doesn't talk about the survival of range of plants. So again, we just use the keywords in the questions to rule out those incorrect options. And this paragraph is very short. I don't think it contains the answer to question 12. So now let's move on to the second paragraph in part B.
There are almost 1,600 recognized species of bamboo, but the report concentrated on the 1,200 or so woody varieties distinguished by the strong stems, or culms, that most people associate with this versatile plant. Of these, only 38 priority species identified for their commercial value have been the subject of any real scientific research to date.
There's no people's names, right? So let's do matching information. This paragraph is all about bamboo species. It doesn't talk about other plants. So it doesn't mention a comparison to more fragile plants. Does it mention the commercial significance of bamboo? Here it says commercial value. So let's read this sentence very carefully. Of these, only 38 priority species identified for their commercial value have been the subject of any real scientific research to date. This refers to the 1,200 varieties that the report concentrated on. So, of the 1,200 varieties that the report concentrated on, only 38, meaning only a small number of species have identified for their commercial value. I don't think it contains any details of the commercial significance of bamboo. This sentence doesn't talk about any details of the commercial significance, so I don't think it contains this information. Next, a description of the limited extent of existing research on bamboo. Does this paragraph talks about research? Yes, it does. Here it says research. And we've just read this sentence very carefully. Is it about limited extent? Yes, it is. Here it says, only a small number of species have been the subject of any real scientific research. So the extent of research is actually very limited because they only include 38 species. And here it uses to date. To date means up to now. So yes, it's about existing research. The extent of existing research on bamboo is actually very limited. So I'm pretty sure the answer is B. These two paragraphs are all about how little we know about bamboo, right? So even though I'm still not sure about assessment, I think the answer to question 1 is B. At least B is the most likely answer for now, right? Alright, let's continue. This paragraph doesn't talk about the uses of bamboo, and it doesn't talk about range of plants. The paragraph is all about bamboo. It doesn't talk about other plants, so it doesn't contain this information. What about question 12? So far, we haven't seen ecological problems and the roots of bamboo, right? Now we can move on to the third paragraph in part B.
This problem isn't confined to bamboo. Compared to the work carried out on animals, the science of assessing the conservation status of plants is still in its infancy. People have only started looking at this during the past 10-15 years, and only now are they understanding how to go about it systematically, says Dr. Valerie Kapos, one of the report's authors.
Alright, here we have someone's name. Let's highlight it and read his statement carefully. People have only started looking at this during the past 10 to 15 years. So what does this refer to? This refers to the science of assessing the conservation status of plants, right? So people have only started looking at the science of assessing the conservation status of plants during the past 10 to 15 years. And only now are they understanding how to go about it systematically. Now let's read the options. Some people do not regard bamboo as an endangered plant species. I don't think this paragraph talks about bamboo being endangered. In fact, this paragraph is no longer about bamboo. These two paragraphs are about bamboo, right? But this paragraph moves on to talking about plants in general. Here it says, this problem isn't confined to bamboo. Compared to the work carried out on animals, the science of assessing the conservation status of plants is still in its infancy, so it's no longer about bamboo. This paragraph is about plants in general, right? So this person doesn't say this. Next, research methods investing in endangered plants have yet to be fully developed. Does this statement mention research methods? Yes, it does, as we just analyzed it. This refers to the science, right? And it refers to this. That means it also refers to the science. So only now are they understanding how to go about the science systematically. This is exactly research methods. Let's continue. Research methods investing in endangered plants. As we just said, this paragraph is about plants in general, but is it about endangered plants? I think yes, because if those plants were not endangered, then they wouldn't need to conserve those plants. They wouldn't need to protect those plants, right? So far this question matches this statement. Let's continue. Have these research methods been fully developed? Obviously they haven't, because from the word now we can know that those methods are not fully developed, right? And here it also says the science is still in its infancy, meaning the science is still in the baby stage. Even though this is not this person's statement, but obviously this person agrees with it, right? So I think B is the answer to question 10. But let's continue to read the remaining question because we may use any letter more than once. The greatest danger to bamboo is disturbance of the places it grows. I don't think this person says this because as we analyzed it, this paragraph is no longer about bamboo, it's about plants in general, right? Now let's do matching information. As I said earlier, this paragraph is no longer about bamboo, it's about plants in general. So it shouldn't contain any of the remaining pieces of information because all remaining information is about bamboo. And since the paragraph is no longer about bamboo, it shouldn't contain the answer to question 12 either. Now let's move on to part C. Remember the information you need to look for. So we need to see if this paragraph contains any of these remaining pieces of information. And we also need to see if it mentions an ecological problem and the roots of bamboo, right? As you read this paragraph, you will quickly notice that here it mentions the roots of bamboo. That means we need to start reading carefully and see if it also mentions an ecological problem.
Bamboo tends to grow in stands, or groups, made up of individual plants that grow from roots known as rhizomes. It is the world's fastest growing woody plant, and some species grow over a meter in one day. But the plant's ecological role extends beyond providing food for wildlife. Its rhizome systems, which lie in the top layers of the soil, are crucial in preventing soil erosion.
Alright, here it says the plant's ecological role, bamboo's ecological role. That means the answer to question 12 may be just a B here. Let's read it again. But bamboo's ecological role extends beyond providing food for wildlife. Its rhizome systems, which lie in the top layers of the soil, are crucial in preventing soil erosion. Soil erosion is definitely an ecological problem, but the text doesn't mention the roots of bamboo, right? But if you read backwards, you will know that rhizomes actually mean the same as roots. Here it says roots known as rhizomes. So I think it's pretty obvious that the answer to question 12 is soil erosion. Soil erosion is an ecological problem. And after we finish question 12, it's best to immediately read question 13 because 13 may appear right after 12 in the passage. Let's read it. Which bamboo product is undergoing market expansion? Let's highlight market expansion to help us locate the answer in the passage. Now let's continue reading. As you can see here, it mentions this person's name again. That means we need to read the remaining text very carefully, right? Now I will play the audio. You try your best to understand what this person says, okay?
And there is growing evidence that bamboo plays an important part in determining forest structure and dynamics. Bamboo's pattern of mass flowering and mass death leaves behind large areas of dry biomass that attract wildfire, says Kapos. When these burn, they create patches of open ground far bigger than would be left by a fallen tree. Patchiness helps to preserve diversity because certain plant species do better during the early stages of regeneration when there are gaps in the canopy.
Alright, if you have trouble understanding what he says, read backwards because his statement is just used to support this sentence, right? There is growing evidence that bamboo plays an important part in determining forest structure and dynamics. That is to say, his statement must be about bamboo's role in determining forest structure and dynamics, right? In short, his statement must be about bamboo's role in forest. Now let's see if there is any matching statement. Some people do not regard bamboo as an endangered plant species. I don't think this is the answer because, as I said, his statement is about bamboo's role in forest instead of bamboo being endangered. Next, The greatest danger to bamboo is disturbance of the places it grows. No, his statement is not about the danger to bamboo, right? It's about bamboo's role in forest. Now we can move on to do matching information. Again, we do other types of questions before we do matching information because answering other types of questions actually helps us better understand this paragraph so that we can answer matching information questions more effectively, right? So, does the paragraph contain a comparison between bamboo and the more fragile plants? Although it mentions other plants, here it says certain plant species. I don't think there is a comparison to other plants. Next, the paragraph certainly doesn't contain the commercial significance of bamboo, right? Next, this one. I don't think the paragraph mentions the uses of bamboo. Finally, an explanation of how bamboo may contribute to the survival of a range of plants. So I just mentioned that the paragraph contains other plant species, but is it about range of plants? Let's read it carefully. Patchiness helps to preserve diversity because certain plant species do better during the early stages of regeneration when there are gaps in whatever. I think a range of plants is just a rephrase of diversity. Here, diversity refers to a diverse range of plants, right? But does preserving a diverse range of plants have to do with bamboo? Let's read backward. Bamboo's pattern of mass flowering and mass death leaves behind large areas of dry biomass that attract wildfire. So basically it says bamboo can do something that attracts wildfire. When this burns, this refers to the large areas of dry biomass, right? Anyways, when this burns, they create patches of open ground far bigger than would be left by a fallen tree. So basically this is saying when the large areas of dry biomass that bamboo creates burn, they can create very large open ground. Patchiness helps to preserve diversity. I think it's very obvious that this paragraph contains this piece of information because patchiness is just something that bamboo creates, right? So basically this is saying bamboo helps to preserve a diverse range of plants, which means exactly the same as this information. We can find a rephrase of every single keyword in this question in the passage. Patchiness is created by bamboo, right? And survival is a rephrase of regeneration. And the range of plants is a rephrase of diversity. So let's choose C. Don't forget question 13. The paragraph certainly doesn't mention market expansion, right? So now we can move on to part D. I think by far you should already have a good memory of the information that you are looking for because we have already read all these questions multiple times, right? So you should know we need to look for if this part contains a comparison between bamboo and more fragile plants, or if it talks about the uses of bamboo. As I read it, I quickly noticed that here it mentions bamboo's economic value. That means the answer to question 3 may be in this paragraph, right? So I will play the audio and you try to find out if this paragraph contains market expansion of a bamboo product and the commercial significance of bamboo, okay?
However, bamboo's most immediate significance lies in its economic value. Many countries, particularly in Asia, are involved in the trade of bamboo products. Modern processing techniques mean it can be used in a variety of ways, for example, as flooring and laminates. Traditionally, it is used in construction, but one of the fastest growing bamboo products is paper. 25% of paper produced in India is made from bamboo fiber.
Alright, it seems that it doesn't mention the commercial significance of bamboo, but I think it's pretty obvious that this paragraph talks about the uses of bamboo. It can be used in a variety of ways. Bamboo can be used in a variety of ways, right? And it even provides 2 examples. This matches this piece of information. Examples of the uses to which bamboo is put, right? Here we have 2 examples, and this sentence is about the uses of bamboo. So let's choose D. Also here it mentions a bamboo product. One of the fastest growing bamboo products is paper. I think it's pretty obvious that paper is the answer to question 13. Paper is a bamboo product, right? And paper is one of the fastest growing bamboo products. That means paper is undergoing market expansion. Market expansion is just another way to say fastest growing. Now let's continue. Of course, bamboo's main function has always been in domestic applications, and as a locally traded product, it is worth about $4.5 billion annually. Do you remember this question? The commercial significance of bamboo. I think that this number shows bamboo is very commercially significant, but does this paragraph contains details of the commercial significance? I think this should be considered only one detail of the commercial significance, but the question uses the plural details. Now, I will play the audio and you try to find out if the paragraph contains details of the commercial significance or not, okay?
Of course, bamboo's main function has always been in domestic applications, and as a locally traded product, it is worth about $4.5 billion annually. Bamboo is often the only readily available raw material for people in many developing countries, says Chris Stapleton, a research associate at the UK's Royal Botanic Gardens. Bamboo can be harvested from forest areas or grown quickly elsewhere, and then converted simply without expensive machinery or facilities, he says. In this way, it contributes substantially to poverty alleviation.
Alright, does it contain details of the commercial significance? I'm not sure. I don't know if this is about details of the commercial significance, but so far I think part D is the most likely answer to question 3. So let's just choose D and highlight it. If we can't find a more obvious answer to this question, we will just choose D, okay? And here it mentions somebody's name. Let's highlight it. So this person says bamboo is often the only readily available raw material for people in many developing countries. And the remaining text continues to talk about bamboo being used as a raw material. That means his statement is not about bamboo being an endangered plant species, and it's not about the danger to bamboo either, right? So no answers to question 8 and 11. Now we only have 3 questions left. Let's see if part E contains any people's names and if it contains a comparison between bamboo and more fragile plants.
Keen horticulturists will spot an apparent contradiction in the worrying picture painted by the UNEP INBAR report. Those in the West who followed the recent vogue for cultivating exotic species in their gardens will point out that, if it isn't kept in check, bamboo can cause real problems. In a lot of places, the people who live with bamboo don't perceive it as being under threat in any way, says Kapos. In fact, a lot of bamboo species are very invasive if they've been introduced. So why are so many species endangered?
Alright, here it mentions this person's name again. Let's read what he says carefully. In a lot of places, the people who live with bamboo don't perceive it as being under threat in any way. In fact, a lot of bamboo species are very invasive if they've been introduced. I think it's pretty obvious that this sentence matches this statement, right? Some people do not regard bamboo as an endangered plant species. Regard is a synonym of perceive, and endangered plant species is just another way to say being under threat. So let's choose B. I didn't see very obvious answers to question 11 and question 2 in this paragraph, so I will just continue. As you can see here, we have someone's name. That means we need to read this paragraph carefully, right? I will play the audio, and you try to find whether this person says the greatest danger to bamboo is disturbance of the places it grows, okay?
There are 2 separate issues here, says Ray Townsend, Arboretum Manager at the Royal Botanic Gardens. Some plants are threatened because they can't survive in the habitat. They aren't strong enough, or there aren't enough of them, perhaps. But bamboo can take care of itself. It's strong enough to survive if left alone. What is under threat is its habitat. When forest goes, it's converted into something else. Then there isn't anywhere for forest plants such as bamboo to grow.
Alright, does this paragraph contain the answer to question 11? Here it says what is under threat is its habitat. I think the places it grows is just another way to say habitat. So when forests go, when bamboo's habitat goes, it's converted into something else, then there isn't anywhere for forest plants such as bamboo to grow. Basically, this sentence is saying that if bamboo lost its habitat, then it won't have a place to grow, right? So the loss of its habitat is definitely a danger to bamboo. But I'm not sure about the word greatest. I'm not sure if the loss of habitat is the greatest danger to bamboo or not. But even though I'm not sure about the word greatest, I think D is a very likely answer. So I will just choose D and highlight this question. If I can't find a more obvious answer in part A, I will just choose D. Now, the last question. Does this paragraph contain a comparison between bamboo and the more fragile plants? Yes, it does. So, from the use of the word but, we know that there is a comparison between bamboo and the other plants, right? So here it says, some plants are threatened because they can't survive in the habitat. They aren't strong enough or there aren't enough of them. This is saying these plants are not strong enough, right? Meaning these plants are fragile. What about bamboo? But bamboo can take care of itself. It's strong enough to survive if left alone. So bamboo is strong while some other plants are fragile. Yes, it's pretty obvious this is a comparison between bamboo and more fragile plants, right? So let's choose E. Now we have finished all questions in part 1. After reading the 2 last paragraphs, I can't find more obvious answers to these 3 highlighted questions. So I think I chose the correct answers for those 3 highlighted questions. Now we can move on to part B. Normally, part 1 is the easiest part in a reading test, but I somehow find the part 2 is the easiest part in this reading test. And for the easiest part, it's very easy to finish all the questions in around 15 minutes if you answer all types of questions at the same time. Do you remember what we should do first? We should quickly go through the types of questions in this part, right? So there are matching information questions, and there are true, false, not given questions. Do we need to read all this information right now? No, we don't, because we won't be able to remember it, right? For now, we only need to read question 20. Photovoltaics are used to store electricity. So how can we identify the keywords in this question? We read the title of the passage. Photovoltaics on the rooftop, a natural choice for powering the family home. From the title, we know that photovoltaics is something on the rooftop that people use to power their homes. And the whole passage should be about photovoltaics, right? That means we shouldn't use photovoltaics to help us locate the answer in the passage. Let's highlight store electricity and use this to locate the answer in the passage. I would also read question 21 right now, because what if the answer to 20 is not given? Like if you keep looking for something that is not given in the passage, then you may miss the answer to the next question, right? So it's a good strategy that we read question 21 right now. In fact, we only need to read it when we see 1970s in the passage, right? Alright, now let's read the paragraph A. Don't read it too quickly because otherwise you may be unable to find if this paragraph contains any of these pieces of information.
In the past, urban homeowners have not always had much choice in the way electricity is supplied to their homes. Now, however, there is a choice, and a rapidly increasing number of households worldwide are choosing the solar energy option. Solar energy, the conversion of sunlight into energy, is made possible through the use of photovoltaics, which are simple appliances that fit onto the roof of a house.
Now, let's do question 20 first, because doing other types of questions actually helps us better understand the paragraph, right? And this, in turn, can allow us better handle matching information questions. So here it mentions photovoltaics. Let's see if it mentions that they are used to store electricity. Solar energy is made possible through the use of photovoltaics. No, it doesn't mention whether they are used to store electricity or not, but the answer to this question may be in another paragraph, right? But for now, let's just choose not given and highlight this question. If we find the answer in another paragraph, we can always come back and change the answer, right? Now, let's read all these pieces of information one by one. Do we remember how we can rule out those incorrect options? We use the keywords in the questions to rule out those incorrect options, right? The first one, examples of countries where electricity use is greater during the day than at night. I think it's pretty obvious that this paragraph doesn't talk about electricity use being greater during the day than at night. Like, if you are not sure about this, you can also use a country to rule out this option. The paragraph doesn't mention any countries, right? So obviously, paragraph A doesn't contain this information. Next, a detailed description of an experiment that led to photovoltaics being promoted throughout the country. Wrong answer, because the paragraph doesn't mention any experiment. Next, the negative effects of using conventional means of generating electricity. Does the paragraph mention conventional means of generating electricity? No, it doesn't. This paragraph only mentions using photovoltaics to generate solar energy. And using photovoltaics is definitely not a conventional way to generate electricity. Conventional means traditional. So this isn't the answer. As you can see, I'm just using the keywords in these questions to rule out those incorrect options, right? Next, an explanation of the photovoltaic system. I'm not sure whether this sentence is about the system. Solar energy, the conversion of sunlight to energy, is made possible through the use of photovoltaics, which are simple appliances that fit onto the roof of a house. I'm not 100% sure, but I will just choose A for now and highlight this question, and I will come back later. Next, the long-term benefits of using photovoltaics. Wrong answer, because the paragraph doesn't talk about the long-term benefits, right? A reference to wealthy countries being prepared to help less wealthy countries have access to photovoltaics. This is obviously a wrong answer, because the paragraph doesn't talk about wealthy countries and less wealthy countries. Alright, let's move on to part B. As you can see here, it mentions no storage is required. So maybe this sentence contains the answer to question 20. Let's read it carefully. The photovoltaics-powered homes remains connected to the power lines, but no storage is required on site. So it's pretty obvious that photovoltaics are not used to store electricity, right? Because no storage is required on site. This is the easiest passage in this reading test, so I'm not going to explain each answer in great detail. Let's change the answer to false and delete the highlight. Now let's continue reading and then answer matching information questions.
Figure 1 illustrates the system. During the day, when the home may not be using much electricity, excess power from the solar array is fed back to the grid, to factories and offices that need daytime power. At night, power flows the opposite way. The grid network effectively provides storage. If the demand for electricity is well matched to when the sun shines, solar energy is especially valuable. This occurs in places like California in the US and Japan, where air conditioning loads for offices and factories are large, but heating loads for homes are small.
Alright, now let's read question 14. Examples of countries where electricity use is greater during the day than at night. Do you remember that we can use a keyword in a piece of information to rule out that information or locate the answer in the passage? So which word can we use to rule out this information or locate the answer? I think we can look for if this paragraph mentions any countries, right? So here it mentions the US and Japan. Let's read this sentence carefully and see if it matches this piece of information or not. This occurs in places like California in the US. So to know what this refers to, we need to read the preceding text, right? If the demand for electricity is well matched to when the sun shines, solar energy is especially valuable. I think it's pretty obvious that during the day is just a rephrase of when the sun shines. So basically, this clause is saying if the demand for electricity is greater when the sun shines, is greater during the day, solar energy is especially valuable, right? So this refers to this clause. This refers to the situation when the demand for electricity is greater during the day. So this situation occurs in places like California in the US and Japan, meaning the situation when the demand for electricity is greater during the day occurs in places like the US and Japan, right? So it's pretty obvious that this paragraph contains this information. Like if you don't understand this sentence, you can also tell from this clause where air conditioning loads for offices and factories are large, but heating loads for homes are small. So they have offices and factories using air conditionings during the day, but only have homes using heaters at night, right? So it's pretty obvious that these two countries have a greater demand for electricity during the day. Let's choose B. Let's also read the remaining questions because we may use any letter more than once. Question 15. A detailed description of an experiment that led to photovoltaics being promoted throughout the country. Which word can we use to rule out it? We can see if this paragraph mentions any experiment, right? No, it doesn't. So this is a wrong answer. Next. The negative effects of using conventional means of generating electricity. No, it doesn't talk about traditional ways of generating electricity. The paragraph only talks about using photovoltaics to generate electricity. So this is a wrong answer. Next, an explanation of the photovoltaic system. I think this text explains how the photovoltaic system works. Especially here. So here it says figure 1 illustrates the system. So the following text must be an explanation of the system, right? Anyways, I think B is a more likely answer than A because this text is a more detailed explanation than this sentence. So let's choose B and delete the highlight. Next, the long-term benefits of using photovoltaics. No, it doesn't mention the long-term benefits. Next, this is obviously a wrong answer because this paragraph doesn't mention wealthy countries and less wealthy countries, right? Now we can move on to paragraph C. We need to see if this paragraph mentions 1970s, and we shouldn't read this paragraph too quickly, right? Because we also need to see if this paragraph mentions any of this information. Alright, as you can see here, it immediately mentions 1970s. Only now do we need to read question 21 carefully. Since the 1970s, the US government has provided continuous support for the use of photovoltaics on homes. So we need to see if the support was continuous, right? Now I will play the audio.
The first systematic exploration of the use of photovoltaics on homes began in the US during the 1970s. A well-conceived program started with the sitting of a number of residential experiment stations at selected locations around the country, representing different climatic zones. These stations contained a number of dummy houses, each with a different solar energy system design. Homes within the communities close to these stations were monitored to see how well their energy use matched the energy generated by the station's dummy roofs. A change in U.S. government priorities in the early 1980s halted this program.
This is the answer. A change in the U.S. government priorities in the early 1980s halted this program. If you know to halt means to stop, then it's pretty obvious that the answer to 21 is false. The program actually stopped. They discontinued the program, so the support was not continuous. And don't forget to also answer matching information questions. A detailed description of an experiment that led to photovoltaics being promoted throughout the country. Does the paragraph mentions experiment? Yes, it does. Here it says experiment. But according to this sentence, we know that the program actually stopped. So it's impossible that photovoltaics was promoted throughout the country. This is why we should do other types of questions first, because doing true-false not given questions actually helps us better answer matching information questions, right? Next, the paragraph doesn't mention traditional means of generating electricity, does it? Next, the long-term benefits of using photovoltaics. No, it doesn't mention the long-term benefits. And finally, this one. This is obviously a wrong answer because the paragraph doesn't mention wealthy countries and less wealthy countries. Now we can move on to paragraph D. But before reading this paragraph, we need to first read question 22, right? The solar-powered houses on this island are inhabited. Obviously, we can use the name of the island to help us locate the answer in the passage. So we need to find out if the houses are inhabited or not, meaning we need to find out if there are any people living in those houses. As you can see here, it immediately mentions the name of the island, so we need to read the text carefully to see if we can find the answer to question 22.
With the U.S. effort dropping away, the Japanese Sunshine Project came to the fore. A large residential test station was installed on Rocco Island beginning in 1986. This installation consists of 18 dummy homes, each equipped with its own 2 to 5 kilowatt photovoltaic system, about 20-50 square meters for each system. Some of these simulated homes have their own electrical appliances inside, such as TV sets, refrigerators, and air conditioning units, which switch on and off under computer control, providing a lavish lifestyle for the non-existent occupants.
Alright, have you found the answer? If you know what dummy means, then it's pretty easy to tell the answer to question 22 is 2. So here, dummy means fake. Dummy homes are fake homes. There are no people living in those homes. If you don't know what dummy means, you can also tell from here. Here it says simulated homes. Simulated means imitated. Those homes are an imitation of real homes, so there are no people living in those homes. And here it also says non-existent occupants, meaning there are no occupants, no inhabitants in those houses, right? Anyways, it's pretty obvious the answer is 2. Before we continue reading the paragraph, we need to first read question 23, just in case 23 appears in the rest of the paragraph. In 1994, the Japanese government was providing half the money required for installing photovoltaics on homes. Obviously, we can use the year 1994 to locate the answer in the passage. Now, let's continue reading.
For the other systems, electronics simulate these household loads. This test station has allowed the technical issues involved in using photovoltaics within the electricity network to be explored in a systematic way, under well-controlled test conditions. With no insurmountable problems identified, the Japanese have used the experience gained from this station to begin their own massive residential photovoltaics campaign.
The rest of the paragraph doesn't mention the year 1994, right? So now we only need to answer matching information questions. A detailed description of an experiment that led to photovoltaics being promoted throughout the country. Does the paragraph mentions an experiment? Yes, it does. Even though it doesn't directly use the word experiment, we can tell from the word test. Here it says, these test stations, and here it also says, under well-controlled test conditions. From the word test, we know that this is an experiment, right? But did the experiment lead to photovoltaics being promoted throughout the country? So at the end of the paragraph, it says, with no problems identified, the Japanese have used the experience gained from this station to begin their own massive residential photovoltaics campaign. I'm not sure massive means being promoted throughout the country or not. Like if you are not 100% sure, just choose an answer for now and highlight the question. We can always come back later. Maybe we will find a more likely answer. Maybe we won't. Who knows? Next, the paragraph doesn't mention traditional ways of generating electricity, right? So this is a wrong answer. Next, the long-term benefits. No, this paragraph doesn't mention the long-term benefits. What about this one? No, the paragraph doesn't mention wealthy countries and less wealthy countries, right? Now, let's move on to paragraph E. Remember to always read with a purpose in mind. We need to see if the paragraph mentions the year 1994, right? And we also need to see if the paragraph contains any of the remaining pieces of information.
Meanwhile, Germany began a very important 1,000 roof program in 1990, aimed at installing photovoltaics on the roofs of 1,000 private homes. Large federal and regional government subsidies were involved, accounting in most cases for 70% of the total system costs. The program proved immensely popular, forcing its extension to over 2,000 homes scattered across Germany. The success of this program stimulated other European countries to launch similar programs.
Alright, this paragraph doesn't mention the year 1994, so we only need to answer matching information questions. Obviously, this paragraph doesn't mention traditional means of generating electricity, and the paragraph doesn't mention the long-term benefits and the wealthy countries and the less wealthy countries. So no answers in this paragraph. Now, paragraph F. When reading, remember to look for the year 1994.
Japan's 1 million roof program was prompted by the experience gained in the Rocco Island test site and the success of the German 1,000 roof program. The initially quoted aims of the Japanese New Energy Development Organization were to have 70,000 homes equipped with the photovoltaics by the year 2000, on the way to 1 million by 2010. The program made a modest start in 1994, when 539 systems were installed with a government subsidy of 50%. Under this program, entire new suburban developments are using photovoltaics.
As you can see here, it mentions 1994. That means we need to read this text carefully to see if it contains the answer to question 23. The program made a modest start in 1994 when more than 500 systems were installed with a government subsidy of 50%. If you read the preceding text, you will know here systems means the photovoltaic systems on homes, right? And the subsidy of 50% is just another way to say half the money. And you know IELTS reading test is all about synonyms, right? So it's pretty obvious the answer to this question is true. Now, let's see if the paragraph contains any of the remaining pieces of information. This paragraph doesn't mention traditional ways of generating electricity. It doesn't mention the long-term benefits, and it doesn't mention wealthy countries and less wealthy countries. Now we can move on to paragraph G. But before reading this paragraph, we need to first read question 24, right? Germany, Italy. Alright, as soon as you see the names of countries, you should immediately know you don't need to read the whole question. You just need to highlight these countries. We only need to read this question carefully when we locate these countries in the passage, right?
The Japanese initiative in embracing residential photovoltaics on a large scale prompted responses in both Europe and the US. The European Commission has called for 1 million solar residential systems before the year 2010, with 500,000 in Europe and 500,000 in the developing world, to be subsidized by the Commission. In 1997, a similar 1 million roof target was announced in the US. Since then, several other countries, including Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Australia, have announced their own targets for residential photovoltaics.
Alright, does this paragraph mention these countries? Yes, it does. That means now we need to read this question carefully. These countries all have strict goals with regard to greenhouse gas emissions. Now, let's read this sentence carefully and see if it talks about greenhouse gas emissions. Since then, several other countries, including Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Australia, have announced their own targets for residential photovoltaics. So this sentence only says these countries have their own targets for installing photovoltaics on homes, right? It says nothing about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, so it's pretty obvious that the answer to this question is not given. But I want to highlight this question. What if the answer to this question is actually in another paragraph? So let's just choose not given for now and highlight it. And don't forget that we need to do the two types of questions at the same time, right? So now let's do match information. This one. Does the paragraph mentions traditional ways of generating electricity? No, it doesn't. So far, the passage has been about using photovoltaics to generate electricity, right? So, wrong answer. Next, the long-term benefits. No, I don't think this paragraph mentions the long-term benefits of using photovoltaics. Next, does the paragraph mention wealthy countries and less wealthy countries? I think yes. Here it says the developing world. This is just a rephrase of less wealthy countries, right? And here it mentioned Europe, which obviously has a lot of wealthy countries. So let's read this sentence again. The European Commission has called for 1 million solar residential systems before the year 2010, with 500,000 in Europe and 500,000 in the developing world to be subsidized by the Commission. So here the Commission refers to the European Commission, right? And the European Commission is going to subsidize 500,000 solar residential systems in the developing world. That is to say, wealthy countries are actually prepared to help less wealthy countries because wealthy countries are actually going to subsidize less wealthy countries. We can tell from the word subsidize, wealthy countries are prepared to do so, right? So I'm going to choose G. Now let's move on to paragraph H. But of course, we need to first read question 12. Residential electricity use is the major source of greenhouse gas emission. I think greenhouse gas emissions is definitely a key phrase here. I'm not sure if residential electricity use is a key phrase or not because the whole paragraph seems to be about residential electricity use, right? It's about generating electricity for homes. So I'm not sure about it. So I will just highlight greenhouse gas emissions.
This is good news, not only for the photovoltaic industry, but for everyone concerned with the environment. The use of fossil fuels to generate electricity is not only costly in financial terms, but also in terms of environmental damage. Gases produced by the burning of fossil fuels in the production of electricity are a major contributor to the greenhouse effect. To deal with this problem, many governments are now proposing stringent targets on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions permitted.
Have you noticed here it mentions greenhouse gas emissions and here it also says the greenhouse gas effect. So let's read these two sentences carefully and see if it talks about residential electricity use being the major source of emissions. Gases produced by the burning of fossil fuels in the production of electricity are a major contributor to the greenhouse effect. Obviously, major contributor is a rephrase of major source, right? But this sentence only says gases produced in the production of electricity are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. It doesn't say whether residential electricity use is the major source of emissions or not. So the answer is not given. But let's continue reading just to make sure we are choosing the correct answer. To deal with this problem, many governments are now proposing stringent targets on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions permitted. This sentence is no longer about sources of greenhouse gas emissions, right? But have you noticed? This part is a rephrase of this question. Strict is a synonym of stringent, and the goals is a synonym of targets, right? However, I think the answer is still not given because the paragraph doesn't mention these four countries. Alright, let's finish reading the last sentence of this paragraph just to make sure we are choosing the correct answer for question 25. These targets mean that all sources of greenhouse gas emissions, including residential electricity use, will receive closer attention in the future. Alright, here it mentions residential electricity use. According to my experience, if you see something that is exactly the same as the question, then it shouldn't be the answer because they will always use synonyms. So it says residential electricity use will receive closer attention in the future. It doesn't say whether residential electricity use is a source of emissions or not, so the answer is still not given. Now let's check if this paragraph contains any of the remaining pieces of information. Question 16. Does the paragraph mention traditional means of generating electricity? Yes, it does. Here it says, the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity. This is a traditional way of generating electricity, right? Let's continue reading and see if it mentions the negative effects of using fossil fuels to generate electricity. It's not only costly in financial terms, but also in terms of environmental damage. This is a negative effect, right? It damages the environment. And the following sentence explains why the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity damages the environment. So I think it's pretty obvious that the answer is H. What about the long-term benefits of using photovoltaics? No, I don't think the paragraph mentions the long-term benefits. Now, let's move on to the next paragraph. Now, we only have 2 questions left, and of course, we need to read the questions first. Energy-saving measures must now be included in the design of all new homes and improvement to new buildings. I think this question is about energy-saving measures, so I will highlight it and use it to locate the answer in the passage. And we also have a matching information question left. The long-term benefits of using photovoltaics. Now, I will play the audio.
It is likely that in the future, governments will develop building codes that attempt to constrain the energy demands of new housing. For example, the use of photovoltaics, or the equivalent, may be stipulated to lessen demands on the grid network and hence reduce fossil fuel emissions. Approvals for building renovations may also be conditional upon taking such energy-saving measures. If this were to happen, everyone would benefit.
As you can see, here it mentions energy-saving measures, which is a key phrase in question 26, right? So let's read this sentence carefully. Approvals for building renovations may also be conditional upon taking such energy-saving measures. Obviously, building renovations is a rephrase of improvements to buildings. But from this sentence, we cannot tell whether the measures must be now included or not, right? But don't choose not giving it. Remember, the answer and the question will always rewrite each other. No way they will use the exact same expression such as energy-saving measures. So let's read it backwards and see if we can find more information. It is likely that in the future, governments will develop building codes that attempt to constrain the energy demands of new housing. Constrain means limit, right? Limit the energy demands of new housing. This is a rephrase of energy saving. So basically, this sentence is saying building codes that attempt to save energy may be developed in the future, meaning the codes have not been developed yet, right? So it is incorrect to say the measures must be now included. So the answer is false and not given. Now let's continue reading and see if the paragraph mentions the long-term benefits of using photovoltaics.
Although there is an initial cost in attaching the system to the rooftop, the householder's outlay is soon compensated with the savings on energy bills. In addition, everyone living on the planet stands to gain from the more benign environmental impact.
This part talks about the benefits of using photovoltaics, right? Let's read it again and see if it's about the long-term benefits. Although there is an initial cost in attaching the system to the rooftop, the householder's outlay is soon compensated with the savings on energy bills. This is a benefit of using photovoltaics, right? Let's continue. In addition, everyone living on the planet stands to gain from the more benign environmental impact. This is another benefit of using photovoltaics, right? Even though the text doesn't use an expression that means the same as long-term, we can tell these are the long-term benefits because here it says initial cost. So this part talks about the short-term downside, right? And the text uses although to form a contrast, meaning the benefit must be the long-term benefit, right? So I think it's pretty obvious that the answer to this question is I. Now, we have finished answering all the questions in part 2. We highlighted 2 questions, question 24 and this one. I wasn't able to find more obvious answers, so I will leave the answers as they are. Finally, part 3. Do you remember what we should do first? We first quickly go through the types of questions in this part, right? So they are heading questions. They are filling in gaps questions, and they are true false not given questions. Now, how should we read all these questions? We don't need to read all these headings right now, right? Because we won't be able to remember them. But you should know you shouldn't read all these paragraphs too quickly, because otherwise you may be unable to find a heading for them. Right now, we only need to read question 33 and question 37. Let's read 33 first. In the late 19th century. Alright, we don't need to continue reading. We just need to highlight late 19th centuries. We only need to read this question carefully when we see late 19th century in the passage, right? Now 37. Using electricity produced by burning fossil fuels to access sources of hydrogen may increase the positive effect of the fuel cell. Now, which word should we use to locate the answer in the passage? Let's read the title of the passage. Putting the brakes on climate change. Are hydrogen cars the answer? From the title, we can know the whole passage must be about hydrogen cars, right? That means we shouldn't use the word hydrogen to locate the answer in the passage because the whole passage is about hydrogen. And from the title, we can know that hydrogen must be a clean source of energy. Otherwise, it won't be the answer to climate change. So hydrogen is a clean source of energy, and the fossil fuels are not a clean source of energy. This is in contrast to hydrogen, right? So I think we can use fossil fuels to locate the answer in the passage. Now let's start reading. Remember to always read with goals in mind. So we need to look for a heading for this paragraph, right? We also need to see if the paragraph mentions the late 19th century or if it mentions fossil fuels.
It is tempting to think that the conservation of coral reefs and rainforests is a separate issue from traffic and air pollution. But it is not. Scientists are now confident that rapid changes in the Earth's climate are already disrupting and altering many wildlife habitats. Pollution from vehicles is a big part of the problem.
Alright, obviously the paragraph doesn't mention the late 19th century and it doesn't mention fossil fuels either. So now we only need to choose a heading for this paragraph. Let's read all these headings one by one. Action already taken by the United Nations. Do you remember how we can rule out an option? We use the keywords in an option to rule out it, right? Obviously, this paragraph doesn't mention the United Nations, so this is obviously a wrong heading. Next, marketing the hydrogen car. No, the paragraph doesn't mention the hydrogen car. Next, making the new technology available worldwide. No, the paragraph doesn't mention any new technology, right? Next, some negative predictions from one group of experts. The paragraph doesn't mention any predictions, so wrong heading. Next, how the new vehicle technology works. No, the paragraph doesn't mention any new vehicle technology. In fact, the paragraph doesn't mention any technology. The history of fossil cell technology. No, as I said, the paragraph doesn't mention any technology. A holistic view of climate change. I think it's pretty obvious that the paragraph is about climate change. Here it says, rapid changes in the Earth's climate. This is climate change, right? It actually doesn't matter whether you are sure about holistic view or not, because the remaining two options are obviously wrong headings. Locating the essential ingredient, sustaining car manufacture. The paragraph doesn't mention any ingredient and it doesn't mention car manufacturer either, right? This makes G the only possible heading for paragraph A. Now let's move on to paragraph B. Remember the information we need to look for. We need to look for a heading for this paragraph, right? And we need to see if the paragraph mentions the late 19th century and if the paragraph mentions fossil fuels. Alright, now I will play the audio.
The United Nations Climate Change Panel has estimated that the global average temperature rise expected by the year 2100 could be as much as 6 degrees Celsius, causing forest fires and dieback on land and coral bleaching in the ocean. Few species, if any, will be immune from the changes in temperature, rainfall, and sea levels. The panel believes that if such catastrophic temperature rises are to be avoided, the quantity of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, being released into the atmosphere must be reduced. That will depend on slowing the rate of deforestation and, more crucially, finding alternatives to coal, oil, and gas as our principal energy sources.
As you can see, here it mentions the United Nations, but I don't think A is the correct heading because I don't think the paragraph is about the action taken. In fact, D is a much more likely answer than A. Some negative predictions from one group of experts. Ask yourself, is the paragraph about the action taken or is it about predictions? Here it says the panel has estimated. Estimate is a synonym of prediction, right? The panel has predicted this negative consequence, and they also predicted this negative consequence. So I think it's pretty obvious that D is the correct heading. One group of experts is just another way to say the United Nations Climate Change Panel, right? Now, does the paragraph mention the late 19th century? No. What about fossil fuels? Here it mentions some fossil fuels. Coal, oil, and gas are all fossil fuels, right? But I don't think that this contains the answer to question 37 because 37 is also about hydrogen. But this paragraph doesn't mention hydrogen. So far, the passage hasn't mentioned hydrogen yet. Now let's move on to paragraph C. We need to find out if the paragraph mentions the late 19th century and if it mentions fossil fuels, right? Now, I will play the audio.
Technologies do exist to reduce or eliminate carbon dioxide as a waste product of our energy consumption. Wind power and solar power are both spreading fast, but what are we doing about traffic? Electric cars are one possible option, but their range and the time it takes to charge their batteries pose serious limitations. However, the technology that shows the most potential to make cars climate-friendly is fuel cell technology.
Alright, as you continue reading, you will notice that here it mentions the late 19th century. So now we need to start reading the paragraph carefully. But before we continue reading, we should first read question 33. Earlier, we only highlighted the keywords in this question, but we haven't read this question. In the late 19th century, the car industry invested in the development of the what rather than fuel cell technology. So we need to find out what did the car industry invest in. And it's pretty obvious that we need to look for a noun or noun phrase, right? Now let's continue reading. This was actually invented in the late 19th century. But because the words motor industry puts its efforts into developing the whatever engine, the car industry is just a rephrase of the motor industry, right? So the car industry put its efforts into developing this engine. I think it's pretty obvious that this is the answer to question 33. But let's finish reading this sentence. It was never refined for mass production. It refers to this, and this refers to fuel cell technology, right? Here it mentions fuel cell technology. So this is saying fuel cell technology was never refined for mass production. Because the car industry was developing this engine, they wasn't focusing on developing fuel cell technology. So I think it's pretty obvious that the answer to question 33 is this engine. Now let's immediately read question 34 because the answer to question 34 may appear in the remaining paragraph. Ford engineers predict that they will eventually design an almost what car? I think we can use Ford engineers to locate the answer. Now let's continue reading. One of the first prototype fuel cell powered vehicles has been built by the Ford Motor Company. So here it mentions Ford. It is like a conventional car, only with better acceleration and a smoother ride. Ford engineers, alright, here it mentions Ford engineers, which is exactly what we are looking for. So Ford engineers expect to be able to produce a virtually silent vehicle in the future. Have you found the answer? Predict is a synonym of expect, right? And design is just another way to say produce. And almost is a synonym of virtual, and the car is a synonym of vehicle. So it's pretty obvious that the answer to this question is silent car. Now, we have finished reading this paragraph. Don't forget question 37. Does the paragraph mention fossil fuels? No, it doesn't. It only mentions some clean energy. Now, let's choose a heading for this paragraph. The paragraph doesn't mention the United Nations, right? And it doesn't mention the hydrogen car. The paragraph mentions fuel cell powered cars, but it doesn't mention hydrogen cars. And I think the paragraph certainly isn't about marketing a type of car, so this is obviously a wrong answer. Next, making the new technology available worldwide. The paragraph does mention a new technology, which is fuel cell technology. But by doing question 33, we know that fuel cell technology wasn't being invested, right? So it's impossible that they were trying to make fuel cell technology available worldwide. So wrong answer. Next, how the new vehicle technology works. The history of fuel cell technology. I think F is a more likely answer than E because this part of the paragraph is all about fuel cell technology. The text afterwards, like however or but, is always more important than the text before however or but. And this part is all about fuel cell technology, so I think F is a very likely answer. Besides, here it says, the first fuel cell powered vehicles. The word first means they're talking about the history, right? So I think this may be the correct heading. I'm not 100% sure if this is the correct heading for this paragraph, but I am so sure the remaining ones are absolutely wrong answers. Locating the essential ingredient. The paragraph doesn't talk about any essential ingredient, and it certainly doesn't talk about sustaining car manufacture. So even though I'm not sure about this one, I'm so sure that the remaining ones are wrong headings, so I will just choose F. Now let's move on to paragraph D. But of course, we need to read the next question first. What's the next question? This one. While a fuel cell lasts longer, some aspects of it are comparable to a what? So we all know the words around the blank are very important, but I think it may be difficult to locate the answer by just using the word comparable. So I want to use this part to locate the answer. I want to see when the passage talks about fuel cells lasting longer. So when reading this paragraph, we need to see if it talks about fuel cells lasting longer and if it talks about fossil fuels. And of course, we also need to choose a heading for this paragraph.
So what's the process involved? And is there a catch? Hydrogen goes into the fuel tank, producing electricity. The only emission from the exhaust pipe is water. The fuel cell is, in some ways, similar to a battery, but unlike a battery, it does not run down. As long as hydrogen and oxygen are supplied to the cell, it will keep on generating electricity.
As you can see, here it talks about the fuel cell doesn't run down. So the fuel cell is similar to a battery, but the fuel cell doesn't run down, meaning the fuel cell lasts longer, right? And isn't it so obvious that comparable is a synonym of similar to a battery, comparable to a battery? So I think it's pretty obvious that the answer to this question is battery. Now let's immediately read the next question. Fuel cells can come in many sizes and can be used in power stations and in wood as well as in vehicles. What are special words here? I think power stations is the most special phrase here, so I will use it to locate the answer in the passage. Now let's continue reading.
Some cells work off methane, and a few use liquid fuels such as methanol, but fuel cells using hydrogen probably have the most potential. Furthermore, they need not be limited to transport. Fuel cells can be made in a huge range of size, small enough for portable computers or large enough for power stations. They have no moving parts and therefore need no oil. They just need a supply of hydrogen. The big question then is where to get it from.
Here he mentions power stations, right? And isn't this part means exactly the same as this part of the question? Fuel cells can be made in a huge range of size. This means exactly the same as fuel cells can come in many sizes, right? Let's continue reading. Small enough for portable computers or large enough for power stations. So, fuel cells can be used in power stations and in portable computers, right? As well as in vehicles. I think this part talks about fuel cells being used in vehicles. They are not limited to transport, meaning they are not limited to vehicles. It's pretty obvious the answer is portable computers. What about fossil fuels? No, it doesn't talk about fossil fuels. So now we only need to choose a heading for this paragraph. The paragraph certainly doesn't talk about the United Nations, right? What about marketing the hydrogen car? The paragraph talks about hydrogen, but I don't think it talks about marketing. It doesn't talk about marketing a certain type of car, right? So wrong answer. Next, making the new technology available worldwide. I don't think this is the correct heading. I think this is more likely to be the correct heading for the last paragraph, because the last paragraph is more likely to be about the worldwide level. Next, how the new vehicle technology works. Locating the essential ingredient. Sustaining car manufacture. Which one of these three is a more likely answer? I think this part is about how the new vehicle technology works. So the first sentence says, what is the process involved? The last paragraph mentions fuel cell powered vehicles, right? So this must be asking, what is the process involved in powering fuel cell powered vehicles? And this text explains the process, right? Although this part is not about fuel cell powered vehicles, I think by and large, this paragraph is about how the new vehicle technology works. Like if you're not sure about it, you can always highlight or mark the question and come back later. I'm not going to mark it. I think the remaining headings are very wrong headings for this paragraph. Now let's move on to the next paragraph. So we need to see if this paragraph mentions fossil fuels, right? And we also need to choose a heading for this paragraph. Now I will play the audio.
One source of hydrogen is water. But to exploit the abundant resource, electricity is needed. And if the electricity is produced by a coal-fired power station or other fossil fuel, then the overall carbon reduction benefit of the fuel cell disappears.
As you can see, here it mentions fossil fuel, but you probably have already forgotten what this question is about. No problem, let's read it again. Using electricity produced by burning fossil fuels to access sources of hydrogen may increase the positive effect of the fuel cell. Apart from fossil fuels, this question is also about electricity production and the sources of hydrogen, right? As you can see here, it says a source of hydrogen is water, and here it mentions electricity production. So I think this text contains the answer to this question. Let's read it carefully. If the electricity is produced by a coal-fired power station or other fossil fuel, then the overall carbon reduction benefits of the fuel cell disappears. So if we use fossil fuels to generate electricity to access sources of hydrogen, then carbon emissions won't reduce, meaning the positive effect of the fuel cell may decrease and not increase, right? So it's pretty obvious the answer to this question is false. Now let's immediately read question 38 because the answer to this question may be in the rest of the paragraph. The oil company, alright, we don't need to finish reading it. We only need to highlight the name of the company and use it to locate the answer in the passage, right?
Renewable sources, such as wind and solar power, do not produce enough energy for it to be economically viable to use them in the manufacture of hydrogen as a transport fuel. Another source of hydrogen is, however, available and could provide a supply pending the development of more efficient and cheaper renewable energy technologies. By splitting natural gas, methane, into its constituent parts, hydrogen and carbon dioxide are produced. One way around the problem of what to do with the carbon dioxide could be to store it back below ground. So-called geological sequestration. Oil companies, such as Norway's Statoil, are experimenting with storing carbon dioxide below ground in oil and gas wells.
Have you noticed here it mentions this company? Only now do we need to read this question carefully. The oil company in Norway owns gas wells in other parts of the world. So this sentence says, this company are experimenting with storing carbon dioxide below ground in oil and gas wells. So it only says this company is trying to store carbon dioxide in gas well. It doesn't mention whether this company owns gas well in other parts of the world, right? So I think the answer is not given. But I want to highlight this question because maybe another paragraph will mention this company again, and maybe the answer is actually in another paragraph. So I will just choose not given for now and highlight it. Don't forget that we also need to choose a heading for this paragraph. I have a feeling that this paragraph is about the essential ingredient because here it says one source of hydrogen is water. So maybe this means water is an essential ingredient to produce hydrogen. And here it mentions another source of hydrogen is natural gas. So maybe this is saying natural gas is another essential ingredient to produce hydrogen. So I think this is probably the correct heading. Besides, the remaining headings are just very wrong, right? The paragraph doesn't mention the United Nations, and the paragraph doesn't mention any type of car. And the paragraph certainly isn't about making something available worldwide, right? Car manufacturer is also an obviously wrong heading for this paragraph. Alright, finally, paragraph F. And of course, we need to first read the question 39. Public transport is teaming the way in the application of fuel cell technology. I think there is an error in this question. Team the way isn't the correct phrase. I think it should be lead the way. Public transport is leading the way in the application of fuel cell technology. I think we can use public transport to locate the answer in the passage. So we need to see if the paragraph mentions public transport, and we also need to choose a heading for this paragraph.
With freak weather conditions, arguably caused by global warming, frequently in the headlines, the urgent need to get fuel cell vehicles will be available in most showrooms. Even now, fuel cell buses are operating in the US, while in Germany, a courier company is planning to take delivery of fuel cell-powered vans in the near future. The fact that centrally run fleets of buses and vans are the first fuel cell vehicles identifies another challenge: fuel distribution.
Have you noticed here it mentions buses, which are a type of public transport, right? So it says fuel cell buses are operating in the US, meaning buses are using fuel cell technology, right? But are the buses the first to use fuel cell technology? Leading the way means being first, so we need to find out if buses are the first to use fuel cell technology. As you can see, later on the paragraph mentions buses are the first fuel cell vehicles, meaning buses are actually leading the way, are actually the first to use fuel cell technology, right? So the answer is true. Now let's immediately read the question 40. More funding is necessary to ensure the success of the fuel cell vehicle industry. I'm not sure if I should use the fuel cell vehicle industry or funding to locate the answer in the passage, so I highlighted both. Now let's continue reading. So we need to find out if the rest of the paragraph mentions funding or the fuel cell vehicle industry. And we also need to choose a heading for this paragraph, right?
The refueling facilities necessary to top up hydrogen-powered vehicles are available only in a very few places at present. Public transport and delivery firms are logical places to start, since their vehicles are operated from central depots.
Alright, the paragraph doesn't mention funding or money, so let's choose a heading for this paragraph. Apparently, the paragraph doesn't mention the United Nations, it doesn't mention marketing, and it doesn't mention car manufacturer. So this leaves this one the only possible heading for this paragraph. Making fuel cell technology available worldwide. Is this what this paragraph about? So the first sentence says, with freak weather conditions, the urgent need to get fuel cell vehicles will be available in most showrooms. I think there is an error in this sentence. It doesn't make sense to say the need will be available. What do you think? But I also think this sentence is trying to say there is a need to make fuel cell vehicles available in most showrooms. Maybe showrooms are places where cars are sold. So maybe it means making fuel cell vehicles available in most countries. Like this is the only possible heading for this paragraph. The other three are just very obviously wrong. So let's just choose C and move on to paragraph G. Now, we only have one question left. So when reading the last paragraph, we only need to see if more funding is necessary to ensure the success of the fuel cell vehicle industry. Fuel cell technology is being developed right across the automotive industry. The automotive industry is just a rephrase of the vehicle industry, right? And here it mentions fuel cell technology. So obviously this is talking about the fuel cell vehicle industry. Now let's continue reading. This technology could have a major impact in slowing down climate change, but further investment is needed. It's so obvious that further investment is a rephrase of more funding, and needed is a synonym of necessary. So this is saying more funding is necessary if the fuel cell vehicle industry is to have a long-term future. Long-term future is just another way to say success, right? So it's so obvious that the answer to this question is true. This part is also done. I only highlighted one question. The paragraph never mentions this company again. So I will just choose not given. Here are all the strategies we've covered in this video. You can pause the video and take a screenshot. Alright, that's it for this video. Don't forget to check out our 3-day Writing Task 2 challenge. The link is in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you soon.